A sophisticated man with a simple message. British Huddle, you've broken down Bitcoin into 3 easy steps. Step number 1 is buy Bitcoin. Step number 2 is shut the fuck up. Step number 3 is get fabulously wealthy. Now, at 15 years old, you started closing property deals due to a smart-ass remark to your father, I believe. Your orange pill moment happened walking around the park, listening to the amazing Bitcoin standard when Safedina Moose explains Bitcoin's stock-to-flow model. Now you're a reformed gold bug with a relentless message to get off zero, to stack at least one whole Bitcoin. That is a particularly privileged mindset, brother. What is your reasoning behind this, and should we light up while we're talking?
There's no better time to light up than the second you feel like lighting up. So yeah, absolutely.
Let's go.
Thank you for that introduction. You've absolutely done your research. I was like, okay, cool. What more do we have to talk about at this point? Sorry, remind me.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. It was fun.
Remind me the question, because I was more amazed by that intro.
Your relentless message from a very privileged mindset that people need to get to one Bitcoin. That's it's not achievable for a lot of people, but you think it's absolutely imperative that this happens. So,
yeah, I think that it is very, very important that people understand the rarity of this asset. That's really it. And the meme of using get to one Bitcoin is because everybody can relate with one, right? And then people go, why is one so special? Because normally people say get to 1 million, right? And all I'm trying to say is get to one Bitcoin. And so it's really designed to help people understand that this asset is extremely rare. And if you don't take this opportunity to get to your one Bitcoin, you're going to regret it. Just simple as that. It is designed to inject some awareness around the scarcity of the asset.
Why do you reckon people are going to regret it? Like, it's just the stuff on the internet that's just sort of come out of nowhere in the last 14 years.
This is the first time in human history where we have an asset where if I am someone who wants to have children or has grandchildren, and I want them to live a better life than I have lived, then they're going to need to own a piece of this asset. It's like owning a piece of prime property in the heart of London or Sydney or Brisbane, right? At the right time. And this is the first time in human history where my progeny's ability to own this asset in any significant fashion rests on my shoulders. Because outside of the miraculous, where one of your children or grandchildren creates a business, sells it for $1 billion, outside of the miraculous, in 30, 40, 50, 60 years time, getting your hand on one Bitcoin is going to be the hardest thing on earth. Because you've already got 60 million millionaires, right? You got a couple thousand, 3,000 billionaires roughly. And then a bunch of normal people, like 8 billion normal people, all finally able to protect their energy in the same asset. So, and you've ultimately got 21 million Bitcoin. This is the best example of true scarcity. In fact, the only example of true scarcity beyond someone's own life that humanity's ever experienced. That's what.
Yeah, that's fuck, man. That's deep. I've heard you also relate it to like the Hunger Games in an auction house for prime assets. And when you sort of went down that, when really rich, wealthy people come in, they don't give a fuck about price. They just want it, and we're going to have this huge fight over it. And then you were saying Bitcoin has never had what was the word? Like a demand shock. It's only ever experienced just a supply shock. What's the difference? And then sort of what are the implications there in regards to that statement?
Well, with every asset, there's two levers that move the price of the asset. There's the demand lever, and then there's the supply lever. With Bitcoin, it's a unique asset because the supply lever is completely fixed. There is no way to shift that supply lever on Bitcoin. It is programmatically fixed into eternity. The demand lever is the only one that can be shifted. And when we look at the demand lever, I was looking at some 2021 research. They're saying roughly between 45 and 60 billion dollars entered the crypto market in that time frame, and that caused the price to move up from 3,500 all the way to 69,000 on Bitcoin. So if 45 to 60 billion went into crypto, how much of it actually went into Bitcoin when we had the biggest shitcoin raging bull market we've ever seen, with NFTs, with VCs, with all this other bullshit trying to get people into these scam coins? I would project somewhere in the region of 25 to 30 billion dollars went into Bitcoin, 50%.
Yep, fair.
If an ETF is approved in America, that opens up $100 billion pipeline into the asset. That's not, and that's just starting, because we've got a total monetary size in the world of 900 trillion US dollars. That's in money that's printed, in assets and leverage. So if people don't think that a portion of that is going to find its way into the hardest asset humanity has ever seen, you're a moron. This is coming. And if as soon as the ETF is launched, that opens that $100 billion pipeline up instantly. Then you're looking at what PayPal, the former CEO of PayPal, was just talking about, which is trying to build rails on the Forex markets in the world. That's a $7 trillion market itself, right?
Yeah.
There is so much demand coming for this one asset. And this is before you get to the billionaires who realize, I don't have one, and my friend who has that Warhol also has a Bitcoin, so I need to get a Bitcoin, because otherwise I don't feel part of the club anymore. Right? Like this watch, I collect watches. This watch was retailing for $12,000, right? I paid $25,000 for it. They couldn't get it to me because it was the pandemic at that time. And so I told them to keep it in Switzerland. And then a year later, I went traveling. A year later, I came back and they delivered the watch for me. By the time I got it onto my wrist, it was worth $75,000. And that's because rich people just wanted it because it was scarce. They make these watches on a yearly basis. They just don't make as many as are wanted. Even if they ramp up the production, the quality doesn't stay the same, so they can't ramp up the production. That is your stock to flow analogy, right? What happens when the actual, it's like you deal with something that's just infinite? Like you can't get any more. It's not that we can't ramp up production. It's not that we can't mine more of it. It's not that we can't build more of it. You just can't fucking get any.
So you obviously used to be like a big gold bug, and I think it sounds like that was your orange pill moment because you really understood the stock to flow model. How important is it that they cannot create any more long term? And like most of the Bitcoin supply is out there. If you're accounting for lost coins, like there's never even going to be 21 million. Like estimates are sort of like 14 to 15 million. Is that going to play a part in this? Like you said, there's 60 million millionaires. If there's only 15 million Bitcoin that are possibly available, and some people have more than one, you're on this rampage to say, like your words of fuck DCA, you have one chance, this is a once in a species opportunity. How's all that play in together? And why? Like you sold all your gold, or that's my belief, and went all the way into Bitcoin. Explain that, because that's old money wealth, and we're coming up and we're putting all our wealth into something that's, like I said, 14, 15 years old at this stage.
So the reason why gold has value, the reason why real estate has value, the reason why the stock market has value, the reason why this watch has value, the reason why anything has value is because of the point at which it exists on the curve of scarcity. Call it like that. The higher, the scarcer it is, the more value it has for human beings. And we are really interesting at this because human beings have this natural innate ability to just take our energy and put it into the scarcest asset. So gold, for example, it takes right now, if you just completely got rid of all of the gold that's on the ground right now, it would take somewhere between 58 and 65 years to remine that gold out of the ground. If you try to do that with real estate, it would take somewhere in the region of 110 to 120 years to rebuild all the properties, all of the development that's happened in the world. So real estate is a harder asset than gold, and therefore real estate has a higher market cap, right? And the one in the middle is the stock market, right? Stock market's kind of hard to value when you look at it from a stock to flow ratio, because there's always new ideas and things like that coming out. But the stock market's somewhere in the middle, and so therefore it has a somewhere in the middle market cap value, right? And so that's how we value things. That's how we value assets. And gold obviously has the lowest ones of that, so it's a $13 trillion market cap. And then silver is less than gold, so it's even less. It's a $1.5 trillion market cap. And eventually, over time, I'm not saying instantly, but over time, humanity finds the hardest asset, because we have this instinctual hunting nature to find the thing that's worth the most. So we'll find it at some point.
Yeah, and it sounds like that we have found it. While I was doing my research, it sounds like you're right into property. Obviously, you started closing property deals at 15 years old. Have you moved away from property now and your message is just Bitcoin? I did see a video that you put out where, this is paraphrased and I may have got it wrong, you're like, fuck looking into real estate right now. If you don't have one whole Bitcoin, your focus needs to be Bitcoin over real estate. And you're talking even to the older generation, not so much to millennials. Can you explain that? Because they may not get this digital quote unquote gold or gold 2.0. I know it's a whole lot more than that, but just for simplicity's sake.
Real estate every generation finds its asset. And real estate was the asset of my grandfather's generation, right? Like my grandfather, the home that I grew up in, he bought it in 1971 for £4,200 in London. And it's now worth £500,000. And it's still, even with that growth, it still hasn't kept up with the amount of pounds that have been printed. It's absolutely kept up with the amount of inflation that's happened in prices, but it's not kept up with the amount of pounds that have been printed. And that's my mission, is to get that across to people. If you think that you're going to own, just like my parents immigrated to the United Kingdom, right? Did the right thing, got married, bought a bunch of properties over 35 years because they thought that that's what was going to protect their two sons' futures. And we come down to it, and now their property portfolio needs to be worth 85 to 90% more than it is in pounds, in order to keep up with the amount of debasement that's happened in the currency. It's kept up with inflation, but it's not kept up with the amount of money that has been printed. And so for me, helping people understand that if you are in real estate at this point, it has been an underperforming asset. It is an asset that completely traps you into the hold of the people that you're trying to actually break free from. It's not served you in what you were trying to do in the first place, which is create some freedom. And it will continue to devalue against the amount of money that has been printed. Real estate is a completely controlled asset. So I'm not saying dump all of your real estate. My parents have not dumped all of their real estate, even though I've tried to tell them to do that. But
What about you?
Yeah, I don't own any real estate. What I will, by the way, right? I'm not afraid of owning real estate. When I get married and decide to have children, I will have real estate. I will buy a home.
Yeah.
But it is not the most pristine asset. It is not the most important asset for protecting your value when you have something like Bitcoin to compare it against. Real estate is a complete trap. It prevents you from moving around the world. The world is getting smaller. The next opportunity might be in Indonesia. It might be in America, right? It might be in Europe. It might be in Africa. Who knows where the next opportunity is? So if you're someone who wants to take advantage of opportunity, real estate is the worst thing you can do, because you're trapped. That's the whole point of real estate. Why do you think every country in the world has tax incentives for real estate? It keeps you trapped. It keeps your wealth trapped in the borders of that country. That's why they have the tax incentives.
Yep. On that regard, say governments or deep state trapping us, you know, through taxes and locking us down into a location. Is Bitcoin going to solve that problem? Can that help people out in those type of situations as well?
From my world, no. Right? Because in my world, we have accountants, we have lawyers, we have things like that, people like that to actually protect. We have asset protection structure attorneys, et cetera, that can figure all that stuff out. So in that world, no, it's going to be Bitcoin's going to be the same as real estate. The difference is that if I am treated badly, it is my choice whether somebody takes control of my asset or not. And that's the difference. Because with property, with real estate, I can go to a judge, get an order against your property and put a ring around it, and then you have to fight that. Whereas with Bitcoin, I can go to a judge, get an order against your Bitcoin, and now I have to beg you to hand over that Bitcoin. Very different.
Yeah. And a lot of people are going to have boating accidents where they lose their private key and stuff, and it's literally just not going to be possible to be able to do that, even if they are ordered in a court of law.
The problem with that mindset is that there is going to be enough chain analysis going on that if you figure out how to move those coins suddenly in 5 years, someone's going to know about it and it's going to trigger an alarm somewhere. So it's better not to do that. It's better just to get a good asset protection attorney. It's better to figure out a trust. It's better to figure out these things and put in and lock your assets up in a way like the way that it's always been done. Bitcoin's no different compared to the way that it's always been done when it comes to asset protection. Figure that out.
And say for someone with millennial, old money gets it, people that you're dealing with your whole life, the old financial people, they get that trust and stuff. Where should people that are just getting into Bitcoin, a lot of people call themselves Bitcoin plebs, obviously they're going to be the new elite. I think we should be able to take that back. Where should they start looking to learn how to protect their assets in a legal, structured way? How do people go about doing that simplistically? I know it's not a simple topic by any means.
YouTube is the best tool for that, right? Go on YouTube and just YouTube, how do I protect my assets? Start watching a bunch of videos, start understanding what it means to protect an asset, what legal entities each country has created to allow the wealthiest of the country to protect their assets. If you're in the United States, you're a little bit more troubled because you're taxed on your citizenship, which is your passport. Whereas for me in the United Kingdom, I'm taxed on residency, not on citizenship. So I can live in a different country like I do and have my tax residency in the UAE. And I pay UAE taxes as long as I spend less than 6 months in the UK.
Yeah. And maybe probing a little bit, but is that what you're doing currently as well to be able to mitigate those taxes or reduce your taxes?
I don't spend any time in the UK. So it doesn't make sense for me to have my tax residency in the UK.
Cool. Let's just flick away. Still talking about hard assets, but you've got a beautiful watch on. You showed. What are your thoughts about luxury watches and rare art? And we sort of touched on the real estate. You're interested in getting back into that later. But say people get to one Bitcoin, should then they start looking into watches and rare art? Or at this stage where we are in the market, just keep stacking Bitcoin? And does that come later, or should they sort of get to one Bitcoin and then start going out and not putting all their eggs in one basket, I guess?
I think it depends on what you love. I sold all my watches that I don't love, right? So the only watches that I own now are the ones that I love. And the reason why I did that was because I had to accept to myself that the only reason I own these is because they're a store of value. So if that's the only reason I own them, that they are a store of value, well, then Bitcoin is a superior store of value. Therefore, I should do the intelligent thing and convert them into Bitcoin. And so I would say that the way the world goes forward is you have Bitcoin as your store of value, and then as you love something, you can then decide to take capital out of Bitcoin and put it into the thing that you love. And that's very important. This reprices so many assets. It's unbelievable. How many people have money in property because they were told, this is how to protect the value of your wealth rather than loving that piece of real estate, right? I know people that literally love a piece of real estate that they own. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. right? It's the house that their kids
Yeah.
grew up in or whatever it is. But to say that you want to own property or you want to own watches or you want to own art because it's a good store of value, well, then now you have to start assessing it in comparison to other stores of value. And in that comparison, Bitcoin wins every time.
Yeah. One of the other things that you said about Bitcoin is like one Bitcoin is they're going to win in the biggest dick swinging contest against someone, say, with $20 million. It's a pretty bold statement. Obviously, that's not happening right now, but how's that play out over
Well, it's
time?
very simple. If I go to, go to London and hang out with a bunch of my friends that collect watches, right? One of us will
Yeah.
walk in with a watch that everyone's just like, fuck, I want that watch, right? But we can't get it because we
Yeah.
can't get the allocation, right? He was lucky enough to get the allocation.
Yeah.
So in that
Yeah.
scenario, we're like, oh, fuck, we all got money, right? But he's the one with the bigger dick right now. So that's just how it works. It's human nature. So somebody with $20 million walks into a room that or somewhere else also has $20 million. One guy's got one Bitcoin, the other one hasn't. It's just very simple. The other one's
Yeah.
got all of his 20 million piled into real estate, and he can't just sell off a piece of real estate to buy one Bitcoin because he doesn't understand it. He didn't take the time to understand it, and now it's getting away from him.
Yeah, cool. So then extrapolating onto that, you're talking about people like with six-figure net worth very shortly going to be priced out of the market, and then it's going to be...
they're already done. Like, you have to put in some real fucking effort in this last bear market if you were making $100,000 a year or $120,000 a year in order to afford one Bitcoin. You have to put in some real work because you got to take away taxes, you take away your living expenses, you take away everything. You're fucked. So in my mind, the people that did it, hats off to you. Like, hats off to the people who were not making the high salaries that everyone talks about and still managed to get to one Bitcoin. Those are heroes. They decided they were going to get something fucking done and got it done. That's admirable. But I think we've already priced them out. The next one we price out low single digit millionaires, because if Bitcoin is 200,000 and you've got a $3 million net worth and it's all in property, what are you going to do? Sell a bedroom? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, not possible.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. It's a little bit of food for thought, and I just want to add on to that. Everyone that has gotten to one Bitcoin, good job. And like your three rules after every video are just absolutely so fantastic. Couple of things that are happening in the UK. Obviously, yesterday at time of recording, Chase is stopping crypto payments. How's that going to affect people to be able to get the world's hardest asset, or are banks just going to start selling Bitcoin themselves and they're going to be the custodians of it? Or are these payment rails really starting to close down and that noose per se is really starting to get tighter and tighter? And we've got limited time, limited opportunity, if even people have the resources to be able to get to one Bitcoin, 5 Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoin. How do you see that happening?
Well, firstly, unfortunately, I'm a very, very proud Brit. I love the United Kingdom. It gave me all of the. I was born in the UK. It gave me all of the opportunities that I ever had. It secured the future of my father's family. It's just the UK has been absolutely fantastic to me. Knowing that, I must also analyze it from where it is today. Right? It is not in the best place today. And I'm sure everyone will say that about their country right now, besides maybe the UAE. So, it's not in the best place today. So I have to analyze it from where it is. And, saying that, everyone's talking about this Chase situation. This is a Chase decision. This is a relatively small retail bank in the United Kingdom. They've decided to ban crypto payments. I don't know whether it's the start of something bigger. Who knows? But it is a relatively small bank. This is not a nation government level rule. This is a small bank that's decided to do that. So I would highly recommend that if people want to send a message, the way you send a message is you vote with your money. Pull your money out of Chase if you were using Chase, and put it into another bank that will allow you, and make sure the stipulation says I must be able to transfer money to a Bitcoin purchasing exchange. So Do I think it's crazy? Yeah, of course. Do I think it's relevant? No.
Yeah. And people just need to learn to be able to take responsibility and start doing their own research, I think, and find ways around there. I guess what you're saying before YouTube is such a wealth of knowledge and resources. Couple of things that you have said, and I want to get a little bit philosophical here, is you've lost a lot of friends in the journey to becoming wealthy. That's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear, but through that journey, what was that like from your old friend group to your current friend group? Have you grown as a person due to that changing of guard?
Yeah, I was very lucky in one sense because I started in business at a very young age. So I just had to make that abrupt shift, right at the
Yeah.
beginning rather than live through it. I always sort of knew when I was 15 years old, 16 years old, that I was going to be successful at something. Um,
Yeah.
so to me, yeah, I lost a bunch of friends, but I also have the best friend, the one best friend that I could rely on for anything, and that's very, very special. So you look at it and you go, I'd much rather have him than them.
Yeah. Better to have a few people that are close and that will always have your back instead of a whole lot of people that are fair weather friends, I guess. Another question for you, British Huddle, is you recently came out and doxed yourself. I know on Twitter Spaces you described yourself as a long-haired white male man, and you're a sexy bald man. Why did you come out and dox yourself and put yourself out there? Is it in regards to pushing the narrative and helping people get off zero, or was there a personal reason
It's a
behind
couple
it?
things. So I started off being quote unquote British Huddle in 2021, and
Yeah.
you know I always had the intention to come out and tell people who I was. It turned into a funny game after a while because everyone just assumed I was a white guy. So I would play along with it and say I identify as a white male because you can do that nowadays. I just want all the white
You identify with whatever the fuck you want these
exactly. I
days.
just wanted all the white privileges that they told me about. So so that's why I was playing along with the game. And then it got to a point where the bear market hit, and I like building in a bear market. I love
Yep.
that gets me excited, building in a bear market. So I messaged three of my friends who are also in the Bitcoin, like the Bitcoin space, right? Creating content and all this other stuff because I sensed
Yep.
their content getting stale. And I was like, how you getting on with this bear market? Because this shit's tough. I understand. I've I've had the fortune of going through a bunch of bear markets, right? Even though I'm pretty young, I've had the fortune of the first bear market I experienced was 2008 and I survived.
Yep.
So having gone through that, this is like a walk in the park at this point. So I messaged them and I said, you better get fucking excited because as soon as I come out, I'm gonna suck away all the attention you think you've got. And of course, we're just
Yeah.
joking around. These are good friends of mine, right? And the reason for me was very simple. People trust people. So I can hide
Yep.
behind the moniker, but this is much better. People trust people. People can relate. People can, just get to know who you are and build a relationship.
Yep. So, what about all the people that have called you wrong when you've been striving to be a little bit mediocre? What do you say to that type of mindset that plagues the majority of the population worldwide? In Australia, we call it tall poppy syndrome. If you're succeeding, people want to chop you down. And they want to bring you back. It's like crabs in a bucket.
My response is like at the end of the day, everyone's got their own BS they're dealing with. Do you know how many times I get told, like, one of the videos will get 20,000 views or something like that, and I'll get a comment saying, "I really need a shorter video. This is too long." It's like, okay, what can I do? I'll do better next time. Like that's my response most of the time. Like I'll do better next time for you. Like
Yeah.
I don't I don't really worry about that. At the end of the day, my own guiding conscience is what I'm looking for approval from. So as long as I know that that piece of content I'm about to put out, I believe it's helpful, then I'll put it out, and it is what it is. And even in any business that I'm doing, it's like, if you, as long as I don't believe I've done you wrong, like, all right, I'll do better next time for you.
Yeah. No, I think that's, like I was saying, you're a man of integrity, and that shows through. Before we went backstage, I believe that the reason that your YouTube comment, which is linked below, content is doing so well is because you speak with integrity, but also with the knowledge of so many years in the market. You said you survived 2008, 2009. What was that like? So many people got absolutely destroyed. How did you pull through that?
The hardest thing I ever done in my life was 2008, 2009. I had a business then, and there was one night where, actually, I haven't shared this, so this is the first time I'm talking about this. So there was one night where I was sitting in this office that we had, and I'm just looking out the window because I know that the business was insolvent, right? Like, it's like, yeah, at the end of the month, we don't have enough money in the bank to pay for the rent. Now, the good news was that the property portfolio was well managed. So that was taking care of itself. Even in that downturn, it was well managed. But the business was struggling. And there was one moment
Yeah.
where, I don't know whether you've ever had that, where you're looking through a window, looking at the whatever's outside, and then suddenly your focus changes and you see the reflection.
Yep.
So that happened, and I saw myself. My eyes made contact with my own eyes. And in that moment, it was weird. I had to ask myself the question, like, either this is going to kill you or you're going to survive. There is a binary option. There is none of this emotion or anything else that I was thinking about. The option is you either make it or you're going to die. You're going to drown.
Yeah.
And I sat there looking in my own eyes for a few minutes, and then I just came to the conclusion that this wasn't it. So I was going to do something about it. And then within 30 days from that point, we were good.
That's absolutely unreal. And is this something that you did all by yourself, or you got surrounded by a bunch of people that helped you succeed? I guess that statement, standing on the shoulders of giants, or was it just all the knowledge that you had accumulated up until that point and you managed to do all that in 30 days all by yourself?
So you got to remember, at that point, I had accumulated a bunch of knowledge from my dad, from everyone around me for such a long period of time. And I can't say that that was me, but it certainly wasn't a group effort because everyone had given up. Everyone had just given up. It was like, this ain't going to work. So let's just wait it out. And so I had to put my own back against the wall, or rather, feel the wall behind my back and make something happen. And that's really important. That's
Unreal.
really important. That what that taught me, coming out of that, taught me that the trust that I have in myself is more important than the trust I need in others. And so that served me every step of the way then, because it's like, everyone could be telling me this is right, that's wrong, this is this, that, and the other. And I'll just go to my inner self for guidance. And as long as my inner self and me are aligned, I appreciate everyone else's advice, but I'm not taking that path because it's not in alignment to what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. So that's what I go for.
Yeah.
That moment, those moments of I'm right, is very, very important. That's your biggest asset. I don't care what anyone says. That is your biggest asset. A series of moments of I'm right. I can trust myself. My inner self can trust me. That is the alignment that people need. And for a lot of people, Bitcoin is going to be the first time that they get that. But because I had that in 2008, it allowed me to, the second Saifedean said the word stock to flow and the matrix aligned for me, I had put 50 grand into Bitcoin by the time I was walking from the park to my house because I trusted myself. Trusting
Yeah.
yourself is very, very important, and most people completely overlook it.
Yep. So talking about Bitcoin's stock to flow model compared to gold, we've got the halving coming up in 2024. So the inflation schedule is going to drop down to roughly about half of gold's, and then another 4 years later, it just keeps reducing, reducing. That's is that what led to that conviction with putting $50,000 in, just from hearing Safe Dynamo's say Bitcoin's got a good stock to flow
No,
model?
he didn't even say it was a
Is
good
that,
stock to flow model. He just said stock to flow. And what that aligns for my brain with all of the experience that I had in real estate, stocks, gold, everything up until that point was I fucked up. I was looking at Bitcoin like an equity, and I should have been looking at Bitcoin like a commodity. And that
yeah.
just aligned me to realizing that the value of Bitcoin is inside of its scarcity.
With that, what's the difference between looking at Bitcoin as an equity versus a commodity? What's the difference there, or the nuances?
Scarcity. Because when you look at an equity, what you're looking at is, can the value of this equity go up over a period of time because they generate good business, they have sales, they have revenue, they have profits, et cetera, et cetera. When you're looking at a commodity, you're looking at what is the hardest asset on earth. Like, what is that, right?
Yeah.
And are people going to want it at some point? And therefore, I should gain an allocation right now and put it in there. Bitcoin's very different because it can actually have both, right? Bitcoin can have both. You can buy the Bitcoin. It can be a commodity because you just leave it there and wait until other people want it. But as the former CEO of PayPal and Jack Mallers is proving, you can actually build on top of Bitcoin. So now Bitcoin can become a revenue generating asset by using it as rails for Forex. That's huge.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that was the first distinction moment for me. It was, holy shit, the stock to flow of Bitcoin goes to infinite at some point. And that's one sentence that I just said there clicked as soon as Seyfriedin said the word stock to flow.
I just want to unpack this a little bit further. You've obviously been thinking about this for so long. How did you have the conviction to know that your thoughts are in line with truth and it wasn't a mind virus that you've gained over the years? Like, to be able to hear stock to flow and then put $50,000 in with such deep conviction, how do you know that there wasn't something implanted that was maybe misleading?
Well, firstly, I had known about Bitcoin before then, right? So I'd already looked into it and decided that it was a scam. I had friends around me that were wealthy who had now started suddenly getting into Bitcoin. I understood what Bitcoin was, and I understood the very basic, which is there are only 21 million Bitcoin, right? I understood logically how that worked out. So then when the words stock to flow came to me, it was like all of that knowledge suddenly just lined up. That's what it was.
Yeah. Cool. And then just that intrinsic compass, I guess you realize, okay, this is truth and this is the path forward that we need to go to.
Intrinsic compass is the most valuable thing somebody can gain.
And with that, how do people, is that through like meditation, reflecting, or bouncing off advisors, or just sitting with themselves? How can they know that their compass, their internal compass, is pointing north?
By doing shit. There is no other way. Like, I don't care what anyone says. I want to meditate so that I know that. No. You do shit. You get punched in the face. You get back up. You do shit again. You get a little bit further. You get punched in the face again, and then you get down, get back up, move a little bit further, you get punched in the face again. That process is what builds that. The relentless nature of keep moving forward is what builds that inner compass. You have to. Alex Hormozy said this in the best way I could think of, which is you have to do enough shit and do it well, and get enough good results where the inner doubt no longer has any value because you have proved to yourself that you are able to do what you need to get done. And but guess what? That's the long road. I'm sorry for anyone who wanted a meditation secret to find that inner compass, but it's the fucking long road. Like, it just is what it is.
British Huddle, in all due respect, like we live in an age of TikTok and instant gratification, like Amazon next day delivery and stuff. It is the way that reality is constructed. Everyone gets a prize. They don't need to do anything hard. Everything's just sort of handed to them at the point of a button. So what do you think about failure? Is failure a good thing to be able to embrace in your life? That's saying like fail forward, or should people just try reflect on things and then make the best thing straight away? And if it's not a success, give up?
Personally, I mean, there's two parts to this question. Number one, they should absolutely embrace failure. That's why America is America. Because in America, when you fail, they don't put you down like they do in the UK, like what you said about Australia, et cetera, right? Whereas in America, failure is encouraged to allow you to learn, right? Like Kevin O'Leary went on TV and said he would give Sam Bankman-Fried money again if he started up another business after he gets through this FTX bullshit. Why? Because the learning process is actually valuable. The failing process is valuable and valued in America, at least up until now. Nowadays, I don't know. But, so that part's failing is extremely important. Now, when it comes to just do something, if it doesn't work, give up. That question I normally hear from people who are trying to follow their passion, right? And I think that's the complete wrong advice. I don't think anyone should find their passion. I think you should do a bunch of shit, and the thing that you do without anyone telling you to do it, that's the thing that you should lean into. I can talk to people about Bitcoin all day from my eyes open to my eyes shut every single day, and I don't get tired. So that's what I lean into. When it came back to when I was 15, 16 years old, I would figure out how to negotiate property deals without anyone telling me to do it or not. My dad told me once, show me. That was it. And I just did it, right? And so that's what I think people should lean into. Yeah, it's going to be hard. What people assume is find your passion, and then it's what's the most effortless thing that you can do. That's a bunch of horse shit.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of happy horse shit. That's never going to happen. Those are the people that are going to quit first. You need to find the thing that you will do no matter how hard it gets, because you just want to do it. You just want to do it.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yep. So the way that I interpret that is if you find purpose, I guess, that thing that you're willing to do, wake up every day and do relentlessly, whether you get instant gratification back, whether it short term it's playing out, or even in the medium term, if you're not getting any reward, but if you know you're living with integrity, with purpose, and you can keep waking up and drive after it relentlessly, that's what you should do. Is that what you're referring to, or am I a little bit
I think
wrong?
that purpose, the word purpose comes later, right? So like for me, this project with British Huddle has purpose attached to it. The first project with real estate had fucking money attached to it. That was it. The only goal was making money. This one has more purpose attached to it. So I think people need to, what's that old metaphor of, you got to fill your own cup up first before you start pouring into other people's cups. So get as greedy and selfish as possible, put yourself in a good place, and then the purpose to help the world will start emerging.
No, I absolutely love it. Let's switch gears. BlackRock, a couple of ETFs and stuff got rejected day of filming. What do you think the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF or all the ETFs do to the space of Bitcoin over the coming years with the supply shock coming into the halving? Is it good for the space long term?
So firstly, I got to make a slight correction. They didn't get rejected. They got delayed, right? They got pushed out. And that's important because the one that hasn't been pushed out, which is the most important one, which could screw the SEC up completely, is the GBTC one. Why? Because the GBTC one is the lawsuit that the SEC has lost and got completely railroaded by the 3 judges. And so all the other delays and all this fancy bullshit is irrelevant. What happens to GBTC at this point? Because with GBTC, it's no longer an SEC can't be bothered and we need more time. It is the judges are telling them now what to do if they don't come up with an answer by, I think it's October 16th or 17th. So that's the most important one. Everything else is irrelevant. Now, The ETF is the single most important event for Bitcoin since Bitcoin. Because I said this to someone and they were kind of shocked by it. And I said, we might enter a period in the next 10 years where the awareness of Bitcoin actually goes down, right? We think we're on a trajectory for high awareness of Bitcoin right now. I think there's a possibility, it's certainly not a zero possibility, where the adoption of Bitcoin grows, the price of Bitcoin grows, but the awareness of Bitcoin goes down. Why? Let me ask you, how much do you know about US Treasury bills?
Absolutely
Right.
nothing.
Right? I think there's probably 50 to 100,000 people on an 8 billion person planet that know about Treasury bills and how they work. And yet, every single person with a mutual fund and a pension fund is invested in Treasury bills. That is what moment for Bitcoin is coming, I think, with an ETF, with companies like Strike, with people like the former CEO of PayPal. If I want to send you value and I get debited pounds in my account and you get credited Aussie dollars in your account, do we give a fuck whether it happened on Bitcoin or whether it happened through the Swift network? We don't really give a
Not at
shit,
all.
right? All I want is the value that we've agreed. So
Yeah.
if Bitcoin can become more adopted, more useful, and less known because it fades into the background, like the internet. We're recording this on StreamYard. This software is built on top of the internet. I didn't need to know how the fucking internet works to do this, right? But
Yeah.
yet, that's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the internet. It is the rails on which all of this stuff can happen, which is quite intriguing. But that's where I think we're going. I think the awareness of Bitcoin is going to go down because the adoption will increase and it will fade into the background and it will take over the system.
Yep. And it'll just sort of, like in Australia, we have this like pension system called superannuation, which is sort of like a retirement account, I guess, with the BlackRock ETF and stuff. They will just hold Bitcoin, and people without even knowing are just going to have Bitcoin as an allocation within their super without knowing that it's even there. What are your thoughts? I believe it's 2030 that central banks all around the world will be required to hold 2% of crypto on their balance sheet. What do you think about that?
I don't know.
Because they say crypto, not Bitcoin.
Yeah, I don't know. Does that mean stable coins? I don't know. I don't know what that means. I don't really think about anything like that. There is so many demand vectors. There is so many avenues for demand for Bitcoin that talking about central banks now holding 2% of their balance, it's like, how much more do you want to blow up the world? Because we're looking at 100 to 300 billion dollars in the first decade of a Bitcoin fucking ETF coming in. You got 330 trillion dollars in real estate. You don't think 1% of that is going to find its way into Bitcoin at some point? You got 140 trillion dollars in the US stock market alone. There's just so much demand vectors for Bitcoin that central banks coming in, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to take ecstasy right now.
That's a bloody nice way to put it. Another quote that you were saying in one of your videos, and it hit me so hard, is ego is going to drive rich people to FOMO into Bitcoin once it hits $1 million, not beforehand. That's that's insane. Like, it's roughly about $25,000 today, give or take. It fluctuates as well. Why are they going to wait all the way until $1 million before they're willing to jump in and that FOMO starts?
Well, the $1 million is more of it's an easy number for people to say. It might be at 800,000, it might be at 900, who knows? But the point is that at some point everyone's going to yield. And I'm talking about Warren Buffett. I'm talking about, Paul Tudor Jones has already yielded. I'm talking about Ray Dalio. I'm talking about all these people are going to yield at some point. And rich people listen to other rich people. And now when they hear their other rich friends and the rich people that they look up to talking about Bitcoin, it's going to take a certain price point for it to hit, and I don't think it happens until that sort of price point. Because the point is that at $1 million a coin, you're sitting at a $20 trillion market cap. You're now approximately double gold's market cap. So now, even though you've been talking shit about Bitcoin before it beat gold's market cap, now it's beaten gold's market cap. Now it's fucking doubled it. So, like, you just, at some point, you just have to yield. And so that's what I think it will take. I think it will take approximate doubling of the gold's market cap. And then really, to double the gold's market cap, you need 26 trillion. But I think approximately $1 million a coin is when people will yield, and they'll start looking at it going, fuck, if I don't get some, I'm never going to be able to get any, because I didn't buy any at 50, I didn't buy any at 500, and now we're at $1 million, and I'm going to get screwed if I don't buy it. So now that panic starts inside the wealthiest in the world. Forget the poor. Talking about the wealthiest in the world. And now they go to their dinner party with their friends, and instead of talking about which piece of fucking art they bought to put on the wall, they're now talking about, hey, I just bought 1 Bitcoin. We just sold one of our manors and bought 1 Bitcoin. Think about that. Think about that conversation. Imagine you're rich and you're worth $20 million, right? And you go to a dinner party with other people with $20 million in net worth. And one guy turns around and goes, I just sold one of my holiday homes to buy 1 Bitcoin. That's interesting, right? That's fucking interesting. At that point now, I'm sitting there going, why the fuck did he do that? That doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you sell your holiday home to buy 1 Bitcoin? I've been hearing about this Bitcoin thing. What is it? So everyone finds Bitcoin at the price that piques their interest. And that price will come for some people, and for the wealthiest, it will be $1 million a coin, because that $1 million fucking dollars a coin, it's like 100,000. For the average person, something reaching 100,000 is like, whoa. For rich people, as soon as it hits $1 million, like people talk about, oh, that watch is $1 million, piques their interest. So,
and then they want it,
right? Then they wonder why the fuck didn't they get it in the first place. So that I think starts that ego drive to acquiring one of these things, these precious things, 1 Bitcoin that we can buy now for 25K.
Awesome. So you're talking about, like, over the next 5 years, Bitcoin's going to sort of have quite a lot of adoption. Do you think it gets to $1 million in 5 years, or when's the $1 million thesis play out and that the ego dick swinging contest happen?
I think it's in the 30s. I think it's in the 30s at some point, and I don't think there's much gap between $1 million and 5 million a coin. That's a $20 trillion to $100 trillion market cap. I don't think there's a big gap between that point. Because you got to think about it. Yeah. Let's say there's 1.8 million roughly Bitcoin available on exchanges right now. The type of buyers that are coming in now are much more sophisticated than the sandal wearing, t-shirt wearing, guys that have been in Bitcoin up until now. These people know how to buy an asset and never fucking let go of it ever, because they know how to generate liquidity on assets that they can own forever. If you tell me you need to buy the S&P 500 index fund and then you need to live off of it, the last thought I'm having is I need to sell it. I got 4 or 5 different ways to generate liquidity off of that asset before I need to sell it. So that's the buyer that's coming in now. These coins will never, ever be seen again. And so let's say, what is it? I don't know, 800,000, 1 million coins by the time we get to that point on the markets. It starts getting really tight. Supply starts getting really tight at that point. We haven't seen nothing yet on the tightness of supply.
Yeah, well, that's a huge statement, considering we went from like just over $3,000 to 69,000. You're saying we haven't seen anything yet. It sounds like we're in for some pretty interesting times. You're talking about never selling Bitcoin. I want to jump into that. But before that, with people right now where maybe 1 Bitcoin is, they hear your 3 rules. Buy Bitcoin, shut the fuck up, and get fabulously wealthy. Should they be taking out leverage, maybe mortgaging their house, taking out a loan to be able to buy Bitcoin now? Or should they, and we're just talking sort of about the average person, should they take leverage to be able to buy Bitcoin and hold it long term, or should they just be able to stack what they can with the cash that they have available?
The average,
not financial advice.
Yeah, the average person should not be utilizing leverage at any level. Because the average person, you have to know your role, right? I've got 18 years of using leverage experience, and I still fuck it up. So you've got to really understand leverage at the right time, how to utilize it, when to do the risk analysis on exactly how much leverage to use. I would stay away from leverage for the average person. I will tell you how my parents did it, because my parents refused to sell their entire property portfolio to buy Bitcoin. So I came up with a compromise for them, and I said, right, why don't we just refi the property portfolio so that you can own one Bitcoin for every property that you own, and the tenants can pay for it, right? Because it's a fixed term contract. It's not gonna fluctuate up and down like crazy, and they've got tenants in there furnishing the debt.
Yeah. And I guess rich people are aware of how to be able to do that. And I guess it goes back for the average person. If they're just above average, maybe they should jump onto YouTube and be able to find that, but maybe proceed with caution if they were to do that. You're saying never, like you'll never sell your Bitcoin, that Bitcoin's never going to come back onto the exchanges. Will you, at a later stage, then leverage against Bitcoin to be able to use it for property or to be able to start a business, or you're just going to buy it and it's just going to sit there sort of like gold in a vault?
No, I mean, let's say I've got, my Bitcoin. Let's say my Bitcoin at one point is worth $10 million, right? I can easily borrow $500,000, $1 million against that, right? It's a 10% loan to value. Nothing's going to happen to that ever. And as long as I do it at the right time and do it with the right providers, I'm going to be fine. So that's how leverage is used in a smart way. What average and poor people do with leverage is try and get the maximum amount of leverage possible. The rich people take the minimum amount of leverage possible. And that's a big difference, right? If I own $10 million of Bitcoin, the average poor person or the average person will try and get $9 million of borrowing against that. Whereas the average rich person is going to go in and try and borrow $1 million against that. So he's got a lot more buffer. That's how wealthy people keep assets, and that's why average people and poor people lose assets.
Yeah, how interesting. With your channel, you're really educating both millennials and the older generation. What are some of the themes that you'd like people to be able to understand going forward as we like at this point in history going towards the halving? How should they maybe approach Bitcoin and investing with their mindset? Because what you're talking about is no longer in regards to the sandal wearing people, the plebs. This is starting to turn into a very serious asset. What should people start to understand before, we start pushing up to 100,000 six-figure Bitcoin?
That's an interesting question, because my channel and everything I say is designed not for the millennials, in my mind, right? I'm glad so many millennials are finding value in it, but it's not designed for them. Everything I say is designed for my parents. It's designed for the people who have spent 30 years doing the right thing, thinking that they will be rewarded for doing the right thing, sacrificing their life for the next generation, and they've now come to this point and they realize they have been royally fucked over because the property they thought they bought, the stocks they thought they bought aren't worth nearly as much as they thought they were going to be. And now into their retirement, they're forced to downsize their quality of their life when they really should be upsizing the quality of their life for the work that they've put in. That's who my message is for. And so the thing that I want everyone to realize is that the main value of Bitcoin is its scarcity. So if there's anything that you do, figure that out. Understand the scarcity part of it. Take as many hours as you need to really, truly understand why scarcity is the most valuable thing. Understand why the business that you built, the property that you own, the stocks that you own, understand where their value comes from and the fact that their value is intrinsically linked to their scarcity. And then once you understand that, you'll then start understanding why Bitcoin is the superior asset.
Yep. I truly believe Bitcoin is a superior asset. Get it? And it takes, you start off with a couple of hours of research, hundreds, and then it turns into thousands of hours very quickly. And you always find more and more rabbit holes. What about people that are just sort of jumping into the space, or they hear JP Morgan is invested in shitcoins like Ethereum and stuff? What are your thoughts on the rest of the crypto space in general? Is it like a psyop? Is it a distraction? Is there any value there? How should people be looking at it? Are they startups that potentially have some economic value?
I think about crypto a lot less than what a lot of Bitcoiners think I think about crypto. I don't think about it. Why? Because I understand the single most important problem humanity has faced, which is 230 years of printed money subjugation that has enslaved humanity into thinking that doing the right thing is going to pay off for them, and it hasn't. Because a handful of people in the world have controlled the value that you have been putting into that printed money for 230 fucking years. That's the biggest issue that humanity has ever faced and ever will face. The protection of your own energy. That is what Bitcoin has already solved. It's not like Bitcoin's going to one day solve it. It's not like Bitcoin's looking for an injection of capital, or this is our project, or this is what we're trying to do and we're going to solve this. Bitcoin has already solved it. So I focus on that. I believe in free markets, but I want the market to be fair. And that's what I believe Bitcoin does. I believe Bitcoin makes the market fair. And once the market is fair, you can come and build whatever you want to build on top of Bitcoin. You want to be a shitcoiner? You want to speculate that digital pieces of art have value, like the ordinals people did, and realize what's happened to those in a matter of months because they built it on top of a solid system. That is how it should work. I want to fix the underlying system. Speculation is always going to be there. I'm never going to rail against a shitcoiner. I'm never going to rail against someone who's speculating with NFTs or whatever the fuck else. Just let's focus on where we're putting our time and energy until the system itself is fixed. And then once the system itself is fixed, go be happy and fucking play around with digital images of whatever the fuck you want to play around with. But the system itself needs fixing, and Bitcoin fixes it. So I don't spend any time focusing on anything else until the underlying system is fixed.
Yep. And do you reckon the current fiat system as it currently stands does crash slowly and then suddenly, and then we go into a full Bitcoin standard? Or how does Bitcoin fix the fiat matrix, I guess, that we're stuck in currently?
You're going to get me hated now by the Bitcoin maxis. They were applauding for me a second ago, and now they're going to hate me because I don't think we ever reach a point where we start pricing things in Satoshis. I think there will always be a reference currency, and I think, at least in my lifetime, that reference currency will be US dollars. So I don't worry about that. I don't really think about it because I just don't think it's realistic to start pricing this cigar in Satoshis. Like I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that happens.
Not
I think
worldwide.
Sorry, after you.
I was going to say maybe that doesn't happen worldwide, but we are still seeing people, exchange value in Satoshis, but it's probably more on a
micro,
like level. A local level.
Yeah, micro level. Like if you tell me, oh, I like this lighter of yours, I want to buy it from you, I'll be like, yeah, send me some Bitcoin and take the fucking lighter. Like, okay, cool. That's one thing. But to say that you're gonna walk into the supermarket tomorrow and everything's gonna be priced in Satoshis, I just don't think that happens, personally. Yeah. I think you have two wallets, and you have a Bitcoin wallet and you have a currency wallet. And then the Bitcoin is your money and the currency is your currency. And you transition between Bitcoin and the currency when you want to spend it, and you transition between currency and Bitcoin when you want to save it.
Yeah, just really quickly, a lot of people already know this, but what do you think the difference is between sound money and currency?
For me, currency is the activation of sound money in an economy. So sound money is something that should be stored and protected, and you turn it into currency in order to use it in an economy.
What else should people be looking at British Huddle going forward? Like, what are some of your thoughts globally that's going on? We see like Operation Choke Point 2.0, whether that's happening or not. Just what are your thoughts sort of about the state of the world? A lot of people call it, clown world. We referred to it as the Fiat matrix, but where should people be focusing their, I guess, their intention and what they're moving towards without having these mind viruses come in that are going to mislead or misdirect them?
You're trying to get me into trouble right now. Like, basically, I think the world is at a very, very weird place. I think the fact that we have over medicated people, I think we have got to the point where we're now blaming each other when we should be blaming, a system of financial subjugation, over medication, and absolute mind virus, terror levels of mind virus based on the media that we have. That is what I think prevents us from standing next to each other and forces us to stare other people in the face and force them to put a mask on when there's no evidence that it fucking works. So that, to me, is the biggest issue that stops humanity standing next to each other. And the biggest threat to the overlords in any system is the people standing next to each other. So anytime you find yourself feeling like someone else is wrong, that person's an idiot, etc., etc., find some empathy and realize, like, why do we have this separation? And is there a conversation there that needs to be had? Now, I understand that there are a lot of people right now that are like Agent Smith in the Matrix, where it's just like, you're talking to a normal person, you say a trigger word, and suddenly they just morph into the agent. So I get that, and you have to be careful with that. But generally speaking, I think, we need more empathy, and we need to understand that, almost 50% of people are on antidepressant drugs. And that's a bad thing. It's a bad state of the world that we're in right now.
Yep. And linking that back, do you think that's due to the broken money supply and the incentives from potentially big pharma and stuff that is the case of the global population?
Everything is downstream of the money. However you want to call the money, everything is downstream from the incentives that the money creates. And if the incentives that we have right now is we need to print as much money as possible to keep the system alive, now we suddenly need to come up with reasons to print that money. So now it's like, oh yeah, if we print this money, we can fix racism. Sure, print it. If we print this money, we can make the sun colder. Print it. Because the goal is to print the money, not to actually fix what needs to be fixed. So we're at a point where we're just looking for excuses to print money, and they're going to come out with any whatever it is. And here's the thing. I'm not even trying to fight against that, because now we actually have a solution where the money can go into that's not controllable and not editable and not adjustable. So now print as much money. You think, oh yeah, listen, I'm all for ESG. Let's go. ESG, we want to print some money to fix racism. Yep, we're doing that as well. We want to print some money to fix people's genders. We're doing that too. We want to print some money to create some equality in the world. We're doing that as well. We want to print some money to make the sun colder. We're going to do that too. Whatever it is, print the fucking money. Great. It's all good. Because at the end of the day, everyone is responsible for their mind. And we finally have something that will bring people back to that reality that I'm responsible for my own mind. And that's Bitcoin.
So for me, I guess my journey through Bitcoin is the more and more I go down the rabbit hole and the more conviction, the time preference changes so much because we have something that's not inflated away. But we have seen like an exorbitant amount of money printed in the last couple of years. We've got the presidential elections next year. Do you think that's going to ramp up again? Because any president, like the current president, wants the economy to look good at that moment for possible re-election. Do you think we're going to see more liquidity flow back into the markets and then ultimately into the Bitcoin in the next couple of years? And is that going to line up with the halving?
It doesn't even matter. We've already got a market with $900 trillion of liquidity flushing around in it. So even if there is zero growth in a system that relies on inflation, so that's the system we live in. We live in a system that relies on inflation. And I'm saying, fuck it, just turn it off, right? That's never going to happen, firstly, because it relies on the money printing to survive. But let's just say, for argument's sake, we're going to turn it off. We still got $900 trillion already slushing around in the current system that we have. You don't think a few percentages of that are going to find its way into Bitcoin with all these avenues that are opening up? We're looking at a $5 to $10 million Bitcoin price within the next decade and a half without any more money printing. I want people to understand that.
Wow.
Everyone has linked up this idea that only when the money printer turns on will there be demand for Bitcoin. That's absolute bullshit, because you got $900 trillion in the market that needs to find value, and it's realized that real estate is not a good value. And now this new thing called Bitcoin that everyone seems to be talking about, Larry Fink is talking about it now. Every single salesperson that works for iShares is now going to be on the phone telling people about fucking Bitcoin. So there's $900 trillion that needs a home, right? As Michael Saylor put it, there's a $900 trillion melting ice cube already. That's before any more ice is added on top of that cube. So we don't have to worry about that. The demand vectors of Bitcoin are not coming from the Federal Reserve deciding to print, $1 trillion of liquidity.
Awesome. With Michael Saylor, he's obviously, like the other day, just bought 5,445 more Bitcoin. What signal is that sending to big businesses, I guess, and to the world?
I think every time the company buys, because we've got to be careful, every time the company buys, I think it sends a signal that, they have conviction in it and it is going to continue to grow. Again, I think that it will make a lot of sense once it reaches certain price points and is accepted by the markets more. It's not there yet. It will get there, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, cool. What takes that? Is that just an increase in price and time? Is that how we see that adoption and we get there?
It's price and access. And that's why the ETF is important. There'll be companies that can put an ETF on their balance sheet a lot simpler than they can actually self-custody Bitcoin, right? There's institutions, there's people, there's everyone that can put an ETF on the balance. The ETF is extremely important, and people are really not understanding how important this ETF is. So we need to get, once the ETF comes out, we open up so much buying power. It's quite remarkable.
Yep. Within especially like Bitcoin Twitter, like exactly on Bitcoin Twitter, a lot of people are railing against BlackRock with their Bitcoin ETF. But ultimately, it sounds like you say that this is actually a good thing. But they have put in a couple of caveats where they can go with the longest chain, or that they're happy to hard fork and stuff. Could that be something that could hinder Bitcoin? Or from listening to you, it sounds like everything that BlackRock is doing with all these ETFs is probably going to be beneficial for the network?
There's no incentive for them to go, and fork it. There's no incentive. They don't control the network. They just own the asset. So what would be the incentive? Like, if you did that and suddenly, I own Bitcoin and you want to go and let's say I own Bitcoin outside of the system, and now BlackRock does a fork on the amount of Bitcoin that they control, right? I'm going to get airdropped a bunch of fucking BlackRock Bitcoin that I'm going to sell in the market, because there's definitely going to be some liquidity if BlackRock's behind it, and just buy the original Bitcoin. So there's no incentive for BlackRock to screw around. Their job is just to provide a facility for people to already get into an asset that they know about. That's it. That's all they're doing. They're asset managers, right? Their job is to create demand and control the supply.
With BlackRock and with their ETF in particular, do you think people, once that comes out, they should just hold the ETF for most people and it's simple to be able to hold on their balance sheet, or they should use that, get exposure to Bitcoin through the ETF, and then they should learn to be able to self-custody, or that won't matter for the masses and for the companies that are getting into it?
The ideal solution is what you said, which is they should gain some exposure, whatever way they do it, and learn about Bitcoin and learn about the beauty of self custody. That's exactly what they should do. Will they do it? No.
Yeah.
I don't care what anyone says. They're not going to do it because they've never done it. So they're going to hold the ETF. They're going to watch the price of their portfolio go up, and they're going to be happy.
Couple of things that I'd like from you. Are there any books that you'd recommend for people that can be Bitcoin or not that have been important in your life? And some final thoughts, potentially philosophical, if you wouldn't mind, British Huddle.
Yeah, I mean, the two books, The Bitcoin Standard by Seyfuddin Ammous and Relentless by Tim Grover. Those are the two books that I would recommend everyone read. Relentless is that book. That book is one book that if you have it inside of you, that book will speak to it. If you read that book and go, this is a bunch of BS, you don't have it. Whatever that it is, you don't have it. And at that point, you can be comfortable and figure out, how do I figure out my life knowing that I don't have it? But if you have it inside of you, Relentless by Tim Grover will speak to it. It will bring it out of you in a way that you have never experienced before. It is not, the fluffy, spiritual, modern day BS that everyone likes to read, thinking that they're hardcore. That book will really bring it out of you if it's inside of you. And so I highly recommend that book. It really spoke to me. Unfortunately, I had that book many years after I'd started my career, but nevertheless, like, that book is extremely powerful. And instead of, in terms of any final words, look, this is the only thing that I have to say. We are at a very, very sensitive time in this world. And the world that we have nurtured to this point, I don't believe makes any sense for the future generations. And I think Bitcoin, an asset that has finality of scarcity, is an opportunity for us as normal individuals to make the future make sense for the people that we want to leave it for. We're experiencing right now a pandemic slowdown of new births, of new babies being born. That is going to, and I don't blame it, because look at the world we've created. Like, subconsciously, we're sitting there going, the world that we have created sucks. We've got to actually love the world that we've created. We've got to actually love the life that we've created. We've got to actually value the future that we are fucking building. And then we can invite the babies, because that's how humanity survives. So if you care any ounce on what your future is, or what the future of your progeny is, it is your absolute responsibility to understand what Bitcoin is and understand the world that needs to be created from responsibility, not desire. And it is your duty to focus on creating that world, however you create it.
What are the 3 rules of Bitcoin?
Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, you shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.